All right, well, welcome to this pilot episode of the It Takes a Team conversation series. I'm Claire Chandler. For those of you who do not know me, I'm the founder and partner of the Chandler Advisory Group, and I am super excited to have this conversation and for all of you who don't know my guest to get to know her. I've been a business owner now for almost 15 years. And before that, I was a corporate survivor and I was a cancer survivor. And I'm here to tell you that there is no such thing as overnight success. There's also no such thing as overnight healing. And neither success nor healing happens alone. And that was really the context or the premise behind this conversation series called It Takes a Team. And I could not have dreamed of a better person to be my very first guest and my partner in this conversation than Jennifer Chapman. So Jennifer, Jiff, for those who know you well and are good friends of yours, and I hope I can now count myself as one of those. Jiff, I would love for you to say a few words about yourself as we were kind of preparing to come together for this conversation. You know, I was saying to you, I don't want to read your bio. I want you to sort of describe yourself. But if I were to pick one word, knowing what I know about you, to describe you, I would call you resilient. For those in the audience who don't know you, by the time we get through this hour, they will know exactly why I describe you that way. So welcome. Thank you so much for sharing this stage with me. And I would love for you to tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you, and it's an honor, an absolute honor to be your first guest. What a thrill! This is going to be such a joy. So I'm born and raised here in Indianapolis. My name's Jennifer Chapman, and I've spent my career mostly in sales, a couple different industries, both corporate and privately owned companies. And I was cruising. I thought I was on this trajectory of what corporate sales success was like. And then I had an event occur in March of 2017. So almost 9 years ago, it has shifted and shaped and created this perspective that has changed every aspect of my life. So I know we'll get into that.
We are going to get into that and so many other things. We're going to get into all the things. And you and I have had several conversations already, and they are, you're that friend that we all have that you can pick up at any point, no matter how much time has gone by, and we can just have a deeper conversation and we can get vulnerable. And so, within this hour that we're going to spend together, I can't promise that we won't shed a tear or two. I think we're just gonna go with the flow and see what happens. So thank you again for being here. So you already created a little bit of suspense with your introduction. I would love for you to share a little bit of this moment or this event that you just alluded to, which I know for you, like my own health journey, really threw your world off of its axis and became something that, in hindsight anyway, became a gift for you. So I would love for you to share that story.
Yeah, thank you. So in 2016, I had left 10 years of an industry that I was very comfortable in and was recruited to go to a big corporate organization in 2015 and had my most successful year going into 2016. So that's where I thought, oh, this is what it's like to hit President's Club and be successful in sales. Like that was the mark. And as an overachiever and a competitive human, at the time, I drew all of my success to what was externally motivated to, win the awards, win the trips, win the cash, win things. And that's what I didn't know then was defining me. So as I was striving for another President's Club year going into 2017, it was a make or break kind of year. I was either going to hit if I had landed this big, huge healthcare system, actually. That was like a 9-month process. And had they said yes to work with us, I was going to hit easy. If they said no, I wasn't even going to come close and was going to have to, you know, just accept the fact that I wasn't going to hit, and it was going to feel defeating. And sure enough, with after a 9 month process, they said no. And at the time, totally defeated. Within that week, my manager, who's the best sales leader I've ever worked with, said switch territories. He's like, let's put you into a different role on a different team and just switch it up for you. That first day that I was supposed to ride with him, I was getting up, got completely ready, was getting ready to leave the house to meet him out in the field, and my body decided to slow me all the way down, and I got overwhelmingly dizzy and started sweating through my clothes. Within 2 minutes, I was drenched. And I knew something was wrong, but I think, like a lot of us, I told myself, okay, you're having an episode of some sort. I'm going to lay down for a couple of minutes, hope that it subsides, go to work today and deal with it when it shows back up, if it shows back up. And I did lay down, and it got worse. And I called my aunt, and that's when I realized I couldn't talk clearly. And I was struggling to swallow. And in a moment like this, your brain goes into protection mode, right? It didn't allow me to freak out and panic. It was very much like a minute by minute. And she's just said, call 911 and I'll meet you at the hospital. And I just said, okay, and called an ambulance, and they came to get me and got to the hospital. And lo and behold, I had suffered a major stroke at 34.
34.
Yeah.
No warning signs prior.
Right. Well, I didn't. There wasn't then.
Yeah.
I didn't know though I had warning signs before. And even when I got there, I'll share this. I think it's important that I couldn't swallow when I got there. I was spitting into a bucket. I remember that. And I remember my dad being there and my husband and my aunt being all in this room with me. I couldn't talk and advocate for myself. And the first neurologist came in and diagnosed me with vertigo. And luckily, my aunt stood up for me and said, I don't know what this is. This is not vertigo. Basically, get out and go find somebody that knows what they're talking about. And he left, and we never had seen him again. And the next neurologist that came in a while later is still my neurologist to this day. I had the testing and the MRI, and I had 3 blood clots in my brain.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there are a couple of different directions I want to go from that. One of which is not to besmirch at all neurologist number one, but really to sort of congratulate your aunt, not only for having the wherewithal to recognize that this was not what he labeled it to be, but to advocate for you and to speak up for you when clearly you could not speak up for yourself.
100%. I'm forever grateful for her to speak up for me and trust that something else was going on. And I share this part of my story. I think it's important because before having my stroke, we didn't really know anybody that had a stroke, especially at my age, right? And I think that he assumed that because I was 34 that it still wasn't a possibility. And with stroke, time is everything. And I know now, 9 years later, I've connected with lots of stroke survivors all over the world that are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and have shared their stories because it happens every single day.
And so it's people. Yeah, and you're right. You don't equate stroke with younger people. You equate it with, well, that's something I don't even have to worry about.
Right.
Hopefully ever, but if I do when I'm, later in life. You used a phrase that I find very interesting that most people who have experienced stroke don't use, or at least are not described that way. You said stroke survivor.
Mm-hmm.
Most people who know someone who has experienced a stroke or suffered a stroke label that person as a stroke victim. And I know that is a bit of a sore point for you because we've had that conversation before. Can you share a little bit of why that gets your hackles up?
Yeah, it's a trigger word for me. And it's one of the reasons why I feel called to be a to speak, and I've, and became a speaker and share this mentality that I've chosen to have, which is, when I first created my business and I was doing podcast guesting, and people were interviewing me, they would call me a stroke victim, not intentionally, and I know that. And I would pay attention every single time when they said it, and I wouldn't correct them. However, I would always speak, yeah, I'm a stroke survivor. Like I would say those words. And it just made me ponder and think, I would only be a victim if it took my life. I would have been a victim of a stroke. I'm here. I survived it. Every person has survived everything they've ever been through until this day. If you are sitting here and breathing, you survived. And that victim word it's a mentality for me. And we can talk more about that, but I've chosen, it's what I speak on, what I believe that I've embraced, and my inner warrior, this warrior type of mentality versus victim mentality. Because we probably all know people that have the victim mentality and they may not even be aware of it, but I'm very aware of it, what that looks like. Yeah. And because too, I'll share when a year, 2, 3 years after, I would be in these Facebook groups, these stroke survivor Facebook groups. And somebody would post the smallest win, that they took a shower for the first time by themselves afterwards, or they're learning to use one arm by themselves and got themselves dressed, or they got up by themselves without assistance. I mean, we're talking celebrating the smallest wins. And then the very next post was, why me? I don't want to be here anymore. I just want to go back to the way I was before my stroke. And it's like, until you realize that's never going to happen, you will stay stuck right where you're at for the rest of your life.
And again, I was an English major in college, which was many moons ago, but I pay very close attention to language, and you are very intentional with the language that you use, not only by self-correcting first about the fact that you are not a stroke victim, you are a stroke survivor, but you also didn't call it survivor mentality, you called it warrior mentality. And even just that word choice is a choice, right? That mindset that you're not just going to be someone that stroke didn't kill me, but that you're like, to hear the term warrior mentality makes me lean in a little bit, right? There's more of this active verb to all of that versus I received the best that the stroke could bring to me and I outlasted it. Warrior means you're a fighter. And that's a choice you had to make. Like at what point, because let me just sort of back up. How long from the time that you went through this experience until you felt that you got a good portion of your life back? You can never go back. Mm-hmm. Right. But how long did it take for you to feel like I'm back to me?
Mm. 5 years. A long time. A long time to really experience not I'm very blessed when it comes to the physical recovery from my stroke. I know that. I worked really hard at it and went through months of rehab. And yet that was not the challenging part for me, because then I decided it was a good idea to go back to corporate sales 5 months later and thought that I was ready. And looking back now, I wasn't even close to being ready, but I didn't know. You don't know what you don't know. You just think it's kind of like step by step by step. And I went back to this corporate position and I stayed there another year and a half. And I guess I just shared this because that year and a half was the hardest part of my recovery, because now I'm being asked to show up professionally and do a job and they were so gracious with me. And I always say that because I know not every company is this kind and gracious to someone that has gone through a life-changing experience. they were so good to me. So yet, each and every day I'm calling on accounts, I'm talking to buyers, I'm trying to close deals, and yet I found myself crying in my car most every day for about 18 months. And I got to this point where I knew I was mentally and emotionally exhausted, and I knew I wasn't myself. I also was living in fear of, now I'm hyper aware of my body. So I'm listening to it all the time of a sign of another stroke. Am I going to have one? I don't know. And about over a year after my stroke is when I hired, when I brought someone to my team. I hired my first team member, I'll say that, who was outside of my family and my friends. And I just knew I couldn't be this, I couldn't feel this way anymore. I'm like, this can't be it. I can't keep living like this every day and crying every day. And that's when I hired my first life coach. And we can talk a little bit about that. But it was 8 months of a partnership that I will never forget. And she is still a dear friend and mentor in my life. And I'm forever grateful for her.
I definitely want to get into that. If you picture that first life coach as one of the rings of your circle, right? It started much closer to you. As you said, that was the first person you added to your team outside of your family. And I think back to when you said you called 911 when you were experiencing what you were experiencing, not knowing what it was, and you were met by your aunt, your husband, your father. Maybe your husband was already with you, but you had this core team of family and protectors and defenders. And I want to go back to your aunt for a second because I feel like she's like one of those superheroes in your life. You know, because again, is she medically trained? Is she a doctor?
No,
And
no.
yet she knew enough that the first specialist to walk in the room, who all the data, all the variables that plugged into his head through his experience, dismissed stroke because of your age. She said, she said, get out and send me
That's right.
somebody who's actually going to listen, who's going to, look at the data, etc. How many times do we walk into a room and feel like we have no voice or feel very strongly about something that's going on in our personal universe, but either lack the words or lack the will to advocate for ourselves? And so how vital is it for us to have people in a room who are not just silently observing what you're going through and bearing witness to that, which is important, but also are standing up and saying, I'm not going to remain silent. If she could speak right now and tell you what's going on, she would, but because she can't, I'm going to scream until somebody starts listening to her.
Right.
And so that's sort of if that's the bullseye in the inner circle of your team, then it became about, let's get the right medically trained professionals in the room who can help us diagnose these symptoms, this experience, this feeling, what I can't tell you until we get to the root cause. Before we get into your life coach, because I definitely want to go there, talk a little bit about your medical team and how what part they played in your, and I know that sort of sounds like an obvious question, but we can often dismiss the medical team as, well, that's their job, of course they're good at it. That first neurologist was a perfect example of, he might be the right tool but for a different job. He was not the right tool for solving what you were going through.
Hmm. I I don't know if my experience is somewhat unique because they didn't know what caused my stroke right away. Normally, they can determine what caused it right away, especially if it's like a brain bleed or something. They'll do surgery, um, but they didn't know what caused the clot. So literally, Claire, for the next year, I went from specialist to specialist to specialist, and my neurologist was that core director, if you will, saying, go here, go here, go here, go here. So I mean, I went to a hematologist and they did a ton of, they took 26 vials in one sitting. And I asked if that was a lot. And the lady's like, at this clinic, no, but for someone your age, yes. But I was still in such a daze. I mean, I was probably 3 months out when I went and did this, that I was just like, do what you got to do it. Like I was very unfazed by thinking that sounded like a lot. And from that told us a lot as well, just some numbers that were, you know, not in normal range. But that went to another doctor, to another doctor, to another doctor. um, it took them over a year to figure out the cause of my stroke, which was I had a tear in my vertebral artery in the back of my neck that had healed on its own. Normally, if they find a tear in your artery, like your carotid artery, again, they go in and do surgery immediately. This was so small, apparently they did not see it after several MRIs and CT scans. But finally they found it and it had healed. And I've got pictures to prove it. She sent me the images, but I wasn't even in a place to mentally see these images, truthfully. I think it was my 6-year anniversary that I went to see her. And she did a CT scan. And I said, I want to come back and I want you to tell me what I'm looking at. And she did. And she showed me. And yeah, so I had a huge team of people, and one of the things that I've learned in traditional medicine is they don't talk to each other. They didn't talk to each other. I mean, she sent me to all these silos, and that's what they were. Like they did what they're experts in, and then that was it. There was no communication well enough, you know, and I think that's still an issue in healthcare. But I don't know. I hope that answered your question. It took about 18 months.
Yeah, no, completely. You know, for my own experience with cancer, one of the things that I had to learn to do very quickly, in addition to getting used to needles, uh, never fun, was never my favorite thing to do, and yet, you know, you find out what you can get used to pretty quickly. Was that I had to learn to trust the experts, right? The people who had knowledge that I did not have, and do it in a way where, you know, I had to let go a certain amount of control. And you know from our past conversations, and you know those in our audience who might know me personally know that that's a big deal for me. Like I am a self-proclaimed control freak, and it's really difficult to give up control. But one of the things that I learned very early on was to, you know, focus on finding doctors that you trust, and they're not all created equal, and we know that. You know, some are really really good at their job, but they just don't vibe with you. And
Right.
once you find that core medical team that you can trust, then literally like let it go and let them handle it, and let them point you to what you need to do next. And my experience was similar in it. You know, it's sort of like when you go to you know, I go to a health group, right, for my primary and my gynecologist, and you know, if I have to go to a specialist, I try to stay within the group, because I also have this assumption that they're talking to each other, and more often
Right.
than not they're not, unless you are in the room with them. All the notes from the other specialists are in that portal, and they're reading it in front of you. So that's a thing, right? That's a
That's the
challenge that
thing.
we continue to navigate. But I think the other thing is, especially when you're going through an experience like you were going through, it is hugely overwhelming. Like all the steps that are in front of you, I learned through experience, they don't tell you everything that's coming, right? They spoon feed you what you need to go to know next. What is the next step that you need to take? Because you know, if they mapped out for me with my experience in the treatment and the follow-up tests and all of that, if they had given me the entire roadmap of what I was going to need to go through, I don't think I would have gotten up off the floor from getting that first phone call that I had cancer. And that was overwhelming enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's part of it too, is that second sort of layer of our inner circles, and that team, that medical team. You know, as much as we get frustrated because they don't seem to communicate with each other, I think part of it also is they're spoon feeding us, because if they freak us out and we have a full-on panic attack, it doesn't really help them provide the, the standard of care that they're, that we're relying on them to do.
Yeah. And what's coming up for me as you were just sharing is with stroke, it's impacting your brain. So versus cancer, where you're aware, you're cognitively aware that somewhere in your body you've got cancer. And so I think that adds an element of overwhelm. Where from a stroke standpoint, I mean that I was in the hospital for a week, had no idea I had a stroke. I go to acute rehab for 10 days, still didn't process why I was there and had a stroke. I mean, they were teaching me how to walk and swallow every day there. It's not like I was sitting there thinking to myself, I can't believe I can't swallow right now. I can't believe I can't that I have to have help walking. Those thoughts just don't show up. So it's kind of a blessing because your brain is in such protective mode that it allows you to kind of physically do what you have to do first, those first few months. And that's all I did once I went to outpatient therapy. That competitive aspect of who I am showed up well. And I was just like, tell me what to do. I want to be better than I was the day before. Challenge me. I was competing with myself. But the mental and emotional part, I mean, I remember telling one of my therapists a few months in, I was like, it's weird that I can't cry yet. Or not yet, that I can't cry because I'm a girl that wears her heart on her sleeve. And I was like, I feel like I can't even produce a tear if I tried. It's weird. And she said, your brain's in protection mode. You will when you're ready. And sure enough, on my 1 year anniversary, I had an appointment with my neurologist on my 1 year anniversary, and I was an emotional disaster showing up in her office. It was kind of like I had stored 12 months worth of tears and emotion, and they started to come out on that day.
The brain, to your point, it's a blessing and a curse, right? Because as you said, it shifts you into protective mode
Mm-hmm.
when you were first experiencing the stroke and your brain was just sort of shutting down the areas that it didn't need you to utilize at that point, or all of that. The curse part, of course, is it doesn't really forget, and we carry around mostly in our brains and our heads a lot of stuff, right? Even if we can't bring it to mind on demand, it's there. And I really want to segue into that because you and I have had really good conversations around this. I know that this is part of what you are now devoting a lot of your life's work, current phase, on. And so I want you to sort of take us through, your journey, and kind of pick what branch we go into next, whether it's to introduce your life coach into this conversation, and or the insights and the realizations you have had around what you have been carrying with you all this time.
Yeah, so I started working with my coach about 15 months after my stroke, and we would meet in a coffee shop. This was before Zoom was what it is now. So we met in person. I did not know her before. I said yes. She was a referral from my best friend had worked with my best friend's mom had worked with her in a professional setting, and she was her coach. And so she's like, why don't you try a coach? I'm like, I don't know what that is. And and I'm going to say yes. I'm going to lean in. I know I need help. I know I want help. That's the difference between people. I think we all need support, but how bad do you want it? And I wanted it. And so we met in a coffee shop, and she was just getting to know me. And I remember it was probably our second session, and she just looked at me and asked, have you asked yourself why me? Again, part of that mentality aspect. And I remember saying to her, I don't remember questioning why me. I know a lot of people around me said, why Jennifer? She was the most healthy person in our family, the most fit person in our family. She took care of herself. How did this happen to her? And as a matter of fact, she just looked at me and said, that's because you need to ask yourself, why not me? And in that moment, I was like, and when people are sitting in the hard, that's a really hard question to ask yourself. Like, what do you mean, why not me? Why not have a stroke at 34? What are you, it's really hard to digest that thought. But as soon as you can, it does shift. And I will also add that it was probably around that same time that I had this epiphany, this life changing epiphany, that I was the same age my mom was when she passed away. So my mom was 34 when she passed away. I was 11. So depending on what direction our conversation goes, that's the work that I didn't know I had to go back and do, was the first traumatic event that I experienced.
Again, I key in on language, right? And you said, and it's so interesting because there are some of these things that you say that you have learned and internalized and absorbed and now wear on your sleeve as part of your journey. And so the rest of us are kind of catching up to, wow, that's a really key moment. And what you said was, when you're sitting in the hard, it's really difficult, if not impossible, to digest what people are trying to tell you. Talk more about that, because I think that that is where we start to get into this notion of what we're carrying and why it is so hard. If we don't deal with the hard because we sit in it or we approach the edges of it and we back away, it doesn't resolve on its own. It just waits for you to face it again.
It gets harder. If you don't face your hard, it doesn't go away. It's going to continue to store up, build up internally in your body, in your system, and it's going to come out in a very loud and potentially more scary way. It's your body keeps the score is a very famous book that I highly recommend everyone read, because is it a coincidence that I had a stroke at 34, the same age my mom did? No, I don't think so. I just didn't know I hadn't. No one teaches you how to grieve, first of all. Grief is a universal aspect of everyone's life, and yet no one teaches you how to do it, and everybody does it differently. So I did not know that I hadn't properly grieved, or I thought I had just done a good job because I promptly in middle school and high school masked up and became this overachiever. Because being able to look back now and easily reflect, it was like I was avoiding feeling and dealing. And I started to tie who I was and my worth to my achievements, both academically and athletically. And then I graduate college and go into sales and still do the same thing, tie all of my success to these external achievements. And yet I didn't know that I hadn't. That's a more productive and healthy way to cope. Still coping. And so that's the biggest lesson my stroke taught. What a gift it's been, because it wasn't until 5 years later when I started to kind of come to accept and embrace this new version of me, is also what I learned when working with my coach, was that I had to grieve my old self. I had to let go of who I was before my stroke, a version of me, and I really liked her. So that was what I thought was really hard, and yet I had to find a way to accept and embrace this version of myself who I thought was a huge emotional disaster of a mess. But once you can start to understand, there's how to understand not only grief but accepting, this acceptance piece of who I am now and who I'm becoming, things get a little bit easier versus trying to go back to who I was, which is, you just don't.
Well, that person doesn't exist anymore, right?
Right, right.
And not everyone goes through as traumatic of an evolution as you did, going through what you went through at 34, let alone going through what you went through at age 11.
Right.
But we we can't go back to our younger selves. We can't, as much as I would love to, we can't, you can't turn back the clock, and you're not that same person. So whether you've had traumatic experiences that bring you to this moment, or just the gradual evolution of who you are and what you can and cannot do and what you believe because of, the passage of time, you're still a different person than you were at that age. So you lost your mom at 11. Did you know at the time that that's what took her from you?
It happened in the blink of an eye. It's not like we got a diagnosis that we had weeks to work with, or months. It was overnight. She had an allergic reaction to something she ate, and her throat swelled at our house at a family cookout 2 weeks before sixth grade. So and I, so it was my dad, and I have a brother, and he was 9. And again, team, the best family a girl could ask for while going through that. Best, best dad. The aunt that you were referring to is my mom's sister, and they're 16 months apart. They were super, super close. So she helped raise me, and she knows me better than almost anybody, I would say. She helped. We had both grandparents on both sides available at all times. So yeah, as shocking and traumatic as it was, I never felt alone. And I'm grateful for that.
And what a difference that makes.
100%.
Not that anyone would wish that experience on you or your brother or your dad or your aunt, but what a difference it makes that you know that you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
You talk a lot in your work, and you and I have had conversations in the past about this. It's not a notion, but this belief around childhood triggers, not triggers, childhood imprints, experiences that we have as our younger selves that leave footprints, signatures, fingerprints, whatever, on us as adults. Again, not everyone maybe can recall as starkly as obviously you can what at least one of those childhood imprints is, but we all have them. And I
Mm-hmm.
know that you passionately believe this, and it is part of what is informing and influencing and enriching your work. Talk a little bit about that.
So in 2020, um, when the world shut down, it allowed me to lean in and explore, can I do for other women what my coach did for me? And so that's when I created Just Commit. But I had no idea what that was going to look like. I just knew, I wanted to support other women that um, the way my coach did for me. So I said yes to this coaching certification in 2021. It was a year long. I did it at night while I still worked. I was in a home health company at the time. So it was several hours a week that we went through the certification. And I did. I didn't know what I was saying yes to exactly. I knew I was saying yes to have a credential of a coach, that credibility, and tools. What are the tools I'm supposed to support clients with? Well, little did myself and 200 other people all over the world that I got to share this experience with, we had to utilize all the tools on each other before we shared them with others. So that was part of the certification. We went through all these, this framework that she offered. And part of this framework that I believe is at the core of who we all are is healing that inner child, that younger version of ourselves. Because at some point, whether you're 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, something impactful has occurred. Everybody's gone through some sort of trauma, not necessarily big T like myself, with loss or divorce or abuse. I mean, those are big T's, but smaller T traumas could be your parents told you you had to be perfect at every single thing that you did. And if you got a B in something or you didn't excel, you got in trouble, right? Or you were the oldest sibling of six. So you became a motherly figure at a very early age. Or maybe you were born in the middle and you were never seen or heard as a kid because your sister was the favorite. So there's lots of patterns and behaviors and things that you learn at that age that then carry with you as an adult. And a lot of it's the first step in all of this work is elevating your own self-awareness to all of that. And then that acceptance piece comes along. So I did not know until going through this in 2021. So almost 30 years after losing my mom, did I have the opportunity to be guided by this master coach during one of these sessions. She helped me meet my 11-year-old self. And I'll never forget that moment as long as I live. It was the first time that not only did I help heal that younger version that we all carry our younger versions with us every single day. And it's the first time in almost 30 years that I also felt safe enough to have a relationship with my mom. Like I could see her, I talked to her, and she's been with me ever since. It was profound.
Wow.
Profound. I think a lot of people, when it comes to grief and loss, I think I was scared to know what a relationship with her was going to feel like because I was so young. I didn't, um, like that I didn't want to allow that in, or I was told as a kid, even months after I was at a place in Indianapolis, literally this guy that I did not know, he knew my uncle. We were at this boat show of all places, and he meets me, and he was like this empath. He was a palm reader, and I'm 11. So he's like, he was like, you want me to read your palms? And I was like, sure. I don't know. And he starts saying things that are very surface level. And then he just stops me and he said, have you had someone close to you pass recently? I'm like, yes. He's like, really close? I'm like, yes. And he's like, she's here. What? So I was a mess. I didn't know how to like wrap my head around that.
Yeah.
And then so I left. Long story short, my uncle called me later that night and said, that guy came back up to me after you left and said that your mom was talking and wants you to know that she loves you and misses you and she's with you. I mean, so that was months later. She showed back up in a dream in college and it was very vivid for me. But I think I've had this like I don't not fear, but just the fear of the unknown of what can a relationship with my mom look like, and it was really that breakthrough moment in 21 that I want to feel her with me. I want to know that she's with me. I want to know that she's protecting me, and I want to know that she's opening doors for me. I mean, she is a huge part of my why and my legacy is to honor her.
There are so many people who are afraid to open that door. And I'll count myself among them. I think many of us are afraid of what opening that door, not only to somebody that we've lost, but to that younger version of ourselves who is in some way, if not scarred, at least hurting, right? And so we do tuck it away in a box on a shelf in a dark corner of our room and go, it's there if I ever need it. I'm never going to throw it out, but I'm not really inclined to open the lid, right? And again, to come back to what your life's work is really becoming is to really help people through that journey, right? Of first of all, opening the box you call it something else, and really kind of dealing with the weight of what we carry, right? It's the reason that we've titled this episode what we have, the things that that we carry. To talk a little bit about that, because I think that that whole concept of what weighs us down
Mm.
is something that is an opportunity if we choose to lean in and finally do something with that weight.
Yeah. So it's it's another book, a book that I read that kind of gave me this idea a couple 4 or 5 years ago. And the book is Own Your Past, Change Your Future, and by Dr. John Deloney. And he talks about everybody's carrying around an emotional backpack. So when I speak to audiences, sometimes I'll open with, okay, who brought a bag with them today? A purse, a backpack, and most people raise their hand, especially women with our purses. And it's like, how heavy is it today? How much stuff did you bring? Is it light? Is it heavy? What do you got in there? And then I'll ask, like, who brought a brick with them? And everybody's like, what in the world? And it's like, those, how many bricks are we carrying around in our emotional backpacks, which are the stories, the experiences, the relationships that have caused us potential pain that we have not dealt with, which is also where victim mentality comes from. Anything that you have not dealt with, resolved, or healed in your life, you are still carrying that with you to this day. How heavy is it? Just because a lot of us, again, things have happened years ago, whether it's loss or, a separation of parents or some sort of abuse of all aspects of that. If you have not dealt with that, that's still playing out in some capacity for you in your life, and or potentially physically manifesting somewhere in your body where you're going to develop some sort of chronic illness or worse. Um, so I help support women kind of unload that emotional heaviness that they've been carrying with them, because a lot of women I work with are these professionals in some corporate space, as well as overachievers, right? We tie our value and worth to a lot of these roles that we play, and more times than not, we not only do we go under the surface, we really uncover, like, what is that thing that feels so heavy for you that maybe you have been scared to talk about or felt safe enough to explore what that is, guilt that comes with it, shame, judgment, all of those things. And it's like, we can rein that in, and you can take your power back and find acceptance and kindness and compassion for yourself, that weight is lifted and you are able to upgrade and move forward in your life at such a different level.
I love that. I've loved that analogy since the first time you introduced that to me in our earlier conversation. And one of the things that you just touched on again, and you mentioned it earlier in this conversation, was this was your impulse, and I definitely related to it, and I think a lot of us relate to it. The impulse to overperform as a means of responding to and yet avoiding grief or guilt, or even, you said, shame. I think a lot of us, I do a lot of coaching as well, and one of the things that always comes up is, especially higher level leaders, the higher they go on the ladder, the more guilt they feel about what they are not paying attention to, what they're neglecting, right? I'm climbing the corporate ladder and therefore my family takes a back seat, or I dared to take a vacation and completely unplug and therefore my team at work was without my guidance or direction. We're constantly, this plays out in every single coaching relationship I've ever had, both myself as the coach and myself as the person being coached. We are constantly reminding ourselves of who we are not making time for in our effort to make time in the role that we're playing in any given moment. And so it's really powerful, like your self-awareness and your insight around that impulse to overperform, that impulse to go right back into your corporate role 5 months after a major health incident. And so I'm curious, because again, we could go down so many different rabbit holes. When you work with people, and I know especially women are your primary focus, and you help them to unpack that emotional backpack and get them to understand that if they just set down the weight of that guilt or that grief or that unprocessed trauma or childhood imprint or what have you, what do they do with that? Because if they have been attributing up until now their overperformance, like the reason that they've got fuel to do so many different things at such a high level is because they're carrying around the grief or the guilt or the shame. What happens when they lay that down? Do they ever sort of come across this wall of, but that's the reason I'm so good at my job, or that's the reason I am so good as a mom because I work extra hard to overcompensate for I'm really broken inside? Like, what do they do once they set that down?
Mm. I I love watching them come back to who they are outside of what they do, because a lot of us, when I ask the question, let's say the first time I meet them, or when I'm in a an audience, a small group environment, and you ask the question, "Who are you?" You know, what the first answers that come up are mom, spouse, daughter, son, teammate, whatever the title is, sales rep, whatever that is. And it's like, those are all roles that you play. That's not who you are. And yet we've been conditioned and hardwired, I think, as a society, even for those to be the answers. And when I can be a mirror and witness women tap back into who they are, it gives them this new sense of clarity and confidence that, like, okay, I want to go into the world with these gifts that are then going to support all the roles that I play and for all the people that I take care of. Once I know who I am as a human being and as a woman and as a man, if you're listening, who are you outside of all the hats that you wear? That unloads a lot. That's that it's never forgetting. I love witnessing people and reminding all of us, like, we're enough. You're enough. If you don't do anything else today, you're good. And I'll share this. I worked with a team a couple 3 years ago at a huge health system here in Indy, and it was a group of healthcare leaders, and we had our coaching session, and there was 10 or 12 of them in the room, and I said, okay, I want everybody to write down an I am statement and say it out loud. And so a few of them went around the room, and this one girl said, I am doing enough. And I said, can I invite you to change that to I am enough? And she couldn't say it out loud. She got emotional. And that's what I want to help, especially professionals, men or women, like, really understand. Know who you are. Know that you've done, that you're enough for today, without having to do anything else, without checking that one last thing off the list. Why, when we all write a list of things to do, if we check off 9 out of the 10, we're going to stare at that one that we didn't do. Versus, like, if you did one of those things today, it still has nothing to do with who you are as a human being.
And again, keying in on language, it's such a simple edit to remove the word doing from that phrase, I am enough. And yet, as you saw and as you witnessed, she could not say those words out loud. And I know that you and I are 100% on the same page about, that first step toward truly not only healing from whatever it is that you need to heal from, but to truly step into your potential and, create the world that you want to live in, that it starts with self-awareness. The second piece to that, of all the choices we have of what we do and who we are and how we show up in the world, it's that self-talk that is so critical. And I
Mhm.
know, you have experienced this as well. There are so many people who look first for external validation that they are in fact enough. And
Mhm.
it's a really powerful part of your process that you serve as that mirror to reflect back to them what they've been trying to dodge, right? And do it in such a way that it is not a judgment. You're not saying I need to be the mirror for you because you have to face up to all the things you're not. You actually are
Mhm.
serving as a mirror so that they face up to all the things that they are. And I would suspect that is an even more painful reflection to come to terms with.
More than I would like for it to be, you know? Like it's doing this work. It's the best work in the world. And I tell people all the time that what I've experienced, time alone was not going to heal me. It's doing the work to better yourself that's going to help you, heal. It's not just, I'm sorry, it's time alone. It will not heal you. It will manifest into something physically, mentally, emotionally if you don't go back and feel. You have to feel to heal. And a lot of people are scared to feel their unhealed pain. That's what I wholeheartedly believe.
Yeah.
And it's
Well,
like, is the longer you go to not feel, it is building up in you each and every day. And it's going to come out in a potentially loud and ugly way, in a scary way.
yeah. And to come back to that theme of it takes a team, it often takes you as an individual making that conscious choice to say, I cannot continue to spin and swirl and spiral alone. I need to, find that person, that mirror, that trusted guide to pull me out and pull me up. And then I need to take it from there and I need to do, as you said, I need to put in the work.
Right.
But, finding that partner that you can trust to be 100% the unvarnished you, which, when that shows up at work, to kind of come back to what do you do with these corporate leaders who are sort of, not dealing with that past because, well, that's scary. And if I don't overperform, what am I? Who am I? In my experience, those leaders are the ones that become imminently more followable because they are more
Mm.
expressly human. And it's that humanity that we recognize in someone else that makes us want to lean in and not only follow them, but help each other succeed. So we have 1 minute left. And again, you and I could talk for days. If we didn't have to eat, like at some point, like we would just keep going. But if there's one message you want our audience to carry with them today, what would it be?
Everybody's got something and everybody needs somebody. Know who your somebody is. And it might not be your parents or your spouse or your family or your friends. And for me, it was my first life coach. It's finding that somebody that is going to create a safe space for you, a non-biased space, a non-judgmental space to walk alongside you and accept and embrace all the parts of you. Because we're not meant to hey, we're not meant to do it alone. None of it. No one is alone. And your thoughts, your feelings, what you've gone through, you're not alone. Find your somebody.
I love that. I love that. You know, and as we said at the top of the conversation, healing and success, they don't happen overnight. And as you just so eloquently said, they don't happen alone. They happen one step at a time. Sometimes it's a leap, and certainly one conversation at a time. And I again I am so grateful to you for taking part in this conversation today. I know that our audience will continue to get something from this. And I want to just thank you, and I want to thank our audience for joining in this conversation. This has been amazing.
Thank you so much. What a joy, what a treat. Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. You made this powerful, as I knew you
I
would.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Everybody have a great evening. Bye.